Bethesda has just released their newest game, Starfield, and I just beat it, so was it worth it? Honestly, it depends on where you stand with gaming and Bethesda as a whole. As for some, the formula of this game is not very different from any of Bethesda's past titles like Skyrim and Fallout. So if you love that formula, you'll likely love Starfield, but if you're expecting something different, it'll just be the same old to you. Your enjoyment also depends on how you choose to play the game, as the design is slightly unbalanced and heavily weighed in one direction despite a seemingly abundant variety of choices. That's the name of the game really, choices, and specifically dialogue choices. Starfield tells a story that is essentially a deep question about existence and the great beyond, but how it's navigated is up to you. Almost every dialogue prompt offers 4 or 5 choices, which means the flowcharts for the programming of this game must have been murals. The characters and dialogue choices provide a nice dose of replay value, but in the end the outcome is always one of either 2 or 3 things, even though replays are strongly encouraged. But that's the heart of the game, essentially a graphic novel of choosing what happens. Much of the time spent playing will be listening to voice lines as if watching a movie. So what about the gameplay itself beyond dialogue choices? Starfield is mostly a first-person shooter with RPG elements and a clunky building simulator also thrown in the mix, and all of it is packed into a story-driven adventure. The guns are a huge part of the gameplay, offering a variety of ballistic, laser, and energy pistols, machine guns, shotguns, and rifles, all of which can be further modified with things like scopes, suppressors, and laser optics. You can switch to third-person view, but I found that that's mostly just for the occasional glimpse of your character and makes the actual first-person gameplay harder. But wait, what does any of this have to do with stars and space? Well, there's also minor planet exploration and flight sim mechanics, as the whole thing is set in a space-populated future where Earth has been destroyed by radiation. But honestly, those 2 things you do the least in the game unless you actively go out of your way to make it part of the gameplay. And the exploration is honestly pretty boring. This brings us to character backgrounds, traits, and skills. When you create a character, you can choose from a variety of backgrounds that come with 3 predetermined skills to suggest how to go about the playthrough. You can also choose 3 traits that mostly serve as background dictators for future dialogue choices and a few gameplay perks, but nothing overly dramatic. The skills, however, are where the gameplay customization really sets in, or so it seems at first. There are 5 branches of skills: physical, social, combat, science, and technology. Each level up grants 1 skill point to spend in one of these categories, and how you divvy it up dictates your playstyle, to a point. Physical boosts your stealth and survival stats, social boosts your dialogue options and persuasion success rate, combat increases attack power, science funnels all points to the background research and building simulator, and technology focuses on piloting skills. Each tree has several options in it, but every playthrough of the main campaign, or any quest line for that matter, is going to demand first-person shooter skills of you, dialogue RNG, and very occasional piloting. I beat the game once and the post-game 3 times, and not more than once did I touch the science skill set. In fact, the whole science tree feels like a separate game that can be avoided altogether. So what does science do? Primarily, it focuses on geology and outpost building, which is the premise of the game's building simulator. The game suggests vast galaxy exploration and outposts to gather resources, but in reality this is what it boils down to. Every planet has next to nothing to do on it except for optionally scan a few animals and rocks, and you can build outposts to mine local elements. The building is as refined as you can get with a controller, meaning it's workable but clunky, and honestly the whole thing is pointless. The idea is to farm resources by the hundreds for research of spacesuit and weapon modifications, but you can just buy those resources instead, and even better yet, you can simply find better spacesuits and weapons from enemies as you adventure, rendering the whole research and outpost aspect as useless as Skyrim's smithing skill. Sure, you can do it, but it's widely unnecessary and kind of a pain. The biggest gripe I have with it is that weapon modifications such as the suppressor for stealth gameplay are locked deep in the science skill tree, meaning you can't put weapon mods on anything for a long time and have to depend on random enemy drops anyway. This is a problem for anyone who chooses to focus on stealth gameplay, for example. So what I've found most beneficial is to invest points into the persuasion skill for better dialogue choices, and divide the rest into combat and physical, with a little bit of focus on tech for the option to pilot better ships. Ultimately, what this means is there's really only one way to play the game when it all boils down to the end, and for a space-themed game, there's very little time spent in the spaceship, unless you ignore the quests and mindlessly explore the barren stars, which again, is incredibly boring. The inventory system can be a bit clunky at times too, and it's very easy to become encumbered, which drains your oxygen and causes you to have to walk slowly or periodically stop, and it completely kills the option to fast travel. But that doesn't mean the game is crap. It's still fun and impressive. The characters are intriguing and well acted out, and the story is at least captivating the whole way through. Whether the conclusion pays off or not is another argument entirely, but the hook is there. The main cities are a lot of fun to explore too, especially Neon, which is loaded with fun quests. The combat is refined and fun to the end, and it's interspersed enough to make the game feel a little more than a first-person shooter. The post-game, without spoiling too much, is important and part of the story as well. You are essentially given the option to redo everything a little differently and are granted special bonus dialogue choices in some instances that are unavailable on the first playthrough. It's nice to see at least once. I had a lot of fun with the game, enough to play through it 3 times and start a new 4th file. So there you go, that's my brief review of the game. If you think you'd like a dialogue-heavy first-person shooter RPG that's a lot like past Bethesda works, then I'd say it's worth every penny, even if it's not as varied as it sells itself to be. Thanks for watching, and please be sure to check out my other reviews in my playlists. Take care.
I followed orders, and I let good men and women do their